This is going to be a little bit more of a talking head type video on YouTube, which I hate, where it's a lot of talking and a lot of information, but this is wiring. And I hate wiring. I don't ever want to do it. Why am I doing this again? I've had to search high and low to get all of this information. I've compiled it all in one place for you. If you're crazy enough like I am to do all this interior wiring, then hopefully this helps you out. I'm going to put all the timestamps down below in the description, so if you're looking for something specific or you want to skip a part, go ahead and click on those timestamps down there. But here's the thing, make sure you like and you comment on this video because it really does help me out. It helps the algorithm, and hopefully this video will get out there enough for people can find it, save you some time. Now with all of that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Hey, sorry to barge in on the video, but to make this wiring video fun, we're gonna do a little drinking game. I didn't realize how much I say the word actually. So whenever you hear me say actually, you'll hear this and you'll see the little down here. So grab your favorite beverage and let's have some fun. Fair warning, pace yourself. It happens a lot. So why am I using all of this interior wiring? Well, I have a complete donor vehicle that I got to fix old Yukon Cornelius here that had a blown up 4L Slippy and a few other little things. So I got this 2002 Suburban on the cheap. And the bonus of it is I can get the engine out of it and rebuild it, turn it into a turbo LS for old Grampy back here. Now typically when you do an LS swap, you're just gonna get the engine from like a junkyard or something, and usually what they do is they chop off the wires right at the firewall and they give you the UBEC, the Underhood Bus Electrical Center, and the PCM and just all the wiring that goes with the engine. And then you have to rework it all and then hook it up to the wiring that's already in your car. But in my case, Grampy don't have no wiring. So I'm left with a decision. Do I spend the money and buy a whole new wiring harness for the interior and then just use the engine wiring? Or do I rip out all the wiring from the Suburban? This wiring is here and it's cheap, and by cheap I mean free. So what's the worst that could happen? These early 2000 GM vehicles, they had a lot of really cool creature features. One of them was the RAP system, the retained access power system that will stay on when you turn the vehicle off and even pull your key out. So you can still roll up and down windows and you can, do the stereo. And they're all like the normal amenities like power windows, power seats, power door locks, the key fob, and you can actually go in and you can program the BCM just from your vehicle by doing weird things like press the lock button a couple times, hit the gas pedal, turn it on, turn it off, press the lock button another few times. When I had this thing hooked up to the battery so I could turn everything on and check which wires I actually need to keep, I discovered a creature feature that I hadn't even thought about. I accidentally left the light switch on when I was testing the lights, and when I turned the key off, the BCM started making that ding ding sound to say, hey dummy, your lights are still on. How many times have I left the lights on my truck when I do like daytime driving on the highway or something? I go home and I forget about it, only later that night to have my neighbor text me and say, hey, your lights are on. Which reminds me, I need to get a ding ding system for my truck. I also want to turn Grampy into kind of a sleeper, but really a road trip car. And one of those creature features that you want is cruise control. You don't want to always be, pressing the gas pedal, you're going to get a cramp or something. And this system also has separate trailer wiring. On the MBEC, you can actually get a pigtail harness to plug in there for trailer brakes. And I may want to utilize that feature on Grampy because I actually have an idea about doing an old teardrop trailer at some point. Who knows if that'll ever happen. So what did this Suburban have that I don't need? I'm gonna get rid of the obvious systems like four-wheel drive, anti-lock brakes, the airbag system. We don't need airbags in an old car. We die like real men. The rear wiper, the rear defog, the rear washer, the OnStar system, daytime running lights, the keyless remote system, and there may be others that we find along the way that I forgot about. And then if you're doing this, you may decide to keep power windows, power seats, power door locks, but I'm actually gonna get rid of all of that. And this system also had an automatic climate control, which has a lot of interior air temp sensors, but I'm not gonna going to use the heater core or the AC condenser deal because it's way too big to fit up under the dash on the firewall. I may eventually go with some kind of a vintage air system that I can mount on there somewhere. Speaking of which, if I'm going to run aftermarket air and heating anyways, why keep the air conditioning stuff in this wiring kit and run it to the PCM? That's a great question. Now most guys just doing an LS swap on your hot rod. If it's a hot rod, chances are you're not going to use AC because again, you want to get the most power, and any parasitic stuff you want to get rid of. But again, road trips, summertime, I melt when it gets over like 72 degrees. So AC for me it is. The AC compressor and the pulley with the serpentine and all that actually adds a lot of drag to your engine. So by letting the PCM control the air conditioning, it anticipates when the compressor is about to kick on and off. And it does all kinds of engine adjustments, beep boop, bop boop kind of stuff. So you get a smooth throttle and a smooth idle. And this is especially important if you're running any kind of performance stuff like a bigger cam, which I definitely am. So there's one really amazing resource. It's called lt1swap.com. They have so many articles and so many pictures and diagrams, and problem is most of it is just for the engine. So I had to do a lot more of my own research to try to find what all of these other things do inside of the car. I've got a stack of printouts about 1/4 inch thick. Some of the stuff I actually had to do a Google search and try to find images. But I also used the Haynes manual because there's a wiring diagram in the back. And again, being a visual learner, I made copies and color coded everything to make it a lot easier to read than just the black and white lines. And on top of that, I had to cross-reference everything. And I made my own spreadsheet of what all the wires are, what all the wire colors are. And again, this is for 2002, so yours might be slightly different. So I'll scan all these documents and put a link to them down in the description so you can print them yourself, so long as you don't mind my scribbling. And on top of all of that, I even labeled each of these wires. So as I'm doing this, I can use my spreadsheet, I can use all these printouts, and I can see on the wire what it actually does and where it goes. Just make sure you label both ends. So if it connects from the LBEC to the MBEC, mark it at the LBEC and the MBEC. That way you can see exactly both ends and what directions they go and where everything is. The more simple you can make this and the less second guessing you have to do, the better. So let's check out this mess of wiring. I laid it out on this giant sheet of plywood, and then I painted a black stripe down the middle. That black stripe represents the firewall. So everything on this side is inside of the cab. Everything on this side is in the engine bay. So since I'm going to need to be moving these wires around, you don't want to clamp them down too tight to the plywood. So I just made these straps using some plumber's strap. And to keep the wires from getting shredded on that metal strap, I actually covered it with some Gorilla Tape. Sometimes even with all these diagrams, you gotta start tugging on wires to see where they go. This box here is under the hood on the driver's side, and they call this the Underhood Bus Electrical Center, or UBEC. And I found it handy to actually label a lot of stuff. That way I don't have to try to read the fine print on all these connectors on the back. This gray connector here, this is what we call C1, and these are mostly wires that go into the interior through the firewall. And then next to it, this is C2, and a lot of those go to the PCM or to your sensors within your engine compartment. And C3 is this red one down here, and those ones are for anything that goes towards the rear of your vehicle. And then this green one is C4, and this one is kind of the same thing, but it goes to the front of the vehicle. This blue one here is C152. This one is C100. This one here is 153. And you've got these two connectors here. These are mostly for transfer case, stuff like that, so we'll be getting rid of most of that. Here's one that runs mostly airbags and temp sensor stuff. And so then the wiring continues on down here, and all of this wiring, that's for your transfer case. And then I've got the rear wiring for it all kind of bundled up there. That's for like anti-lock brake module and your fuel pump, center gauge. So going from the UBEC over here, here's where it goes through the firewall and then splits off in a bajillion different directions. This sort of faded white one here, this is your MBEC, or Middle Bus Electrical Center. The gray one is C1 and the white one is C2. Splice pack 203 is this guy right here, and these are all just grounds. So anytime in the wiring diagram you see splice pack 203, that's what this guy is right here. This box right here is located on the left side of the dash, and this would be your LBEC, or left bus electrical center. This is a lot of your power seats, power windows, but this is also has your turn signal flasher on it. A lot of the wires that go to your key switch are right here, and these will be like your accessory wires and your ignition wires. The yellow wire is your crank wire, and then I wired together the pink wire and the white wire, which is ignition 0 and ignition 1. And then you've got two accessories. You've got a brown and an orange accessory. I just ran both of those to the accessory port. And here I've got my turn signal switch. And this has stuff like cruise control, which is this guy here, and this button here. And it also has your wiper control, as well as your washer, and then obviously turn signals and hazard. So there's 4 systems on here that will probably end up separating because I want to run the old school lever that's already on my steering column. So staying over here on the driver's side, this right here is your splice pack 205. And then here is your OBD2 port, which we're also going to keep. And then this wiring here, this actually goes up underneath the driver's seat. And this is for your airbags. So we'll get rid of all of this wiring. And then this right here is for the wiring on the door. I call this D1. There's a lot of stuff on here we're not going to use, so we're going to actually whittle down these wires to the ones that we actually need and get rid of this entire clip. And then moving up underneath the dash, this is your auto transfer case module. And since we're not running 4-wheel drive, we're going to get rid of all of this wiring. And then coming up here, this is all for 4-wheel drive, getting rid of all of that. This one here is your rear wiper switch and also your fog light switch. And then this right here is where the light switch will plug in. So we identified all of those so we know what we're gonna need to hook up to our old school light switch. And then we've got this right here. This is your BCM, your body control module. This is what tells all of these systems what to do. On this particular one, keep in mind this is a 2002, so yours might be a little different. You've got brown, blue, and purple, and this is C1, C2, and C3. And then mounted up on top of the dash, right above the steering wheel, is the module for the OnStar system. Moving down farther towards the passenger side, you've got this little weird guy right here. This is for your keyless entry. This is what will unlock and lock your doors using your key fob. Coming down here again towards the passenger side of the dash, this crazy looking thing right here, this is the audio control module. And then this right here, this is cool. I didn't know that these cars actually had this. This is an amplifier for your stereo. So again, down the passenger side of the dash, down by kind of the floorboard at the right side of the dash, this is your RBEC, Right Bus Electrical Center. And it's got a lot of controls for like heater, the door stuff for your passenger door and rear passenger door, some relays. And then these wires here actually go down the pillar on the passenger side and then underneath the door sill. And you've got this white connector here that I call P1 because this is just like the D1 over on the driver's side. And then this one goes to a lot of the rear stuff, like rear climate module thing. This is what I call P2. So for the wires I'm going to remove, I'm actually going to mark them with this red duct tape because then I know when I see red, I can just go ahead and remove it. But this is the time where you want to make sure that you double check everything. So now it's time to start pulling some wires. And this can be kind of intimidating, but the thing about it is if you take careful notes and then you find out later that you actually do need a wire, then as long as you know where that wire goes according to your notes, you can always put it back. So we're gonna go ahead and start with P1 here, and these ones are for the right front speaker. These are the only ones on this whole harness that we're gonna keep. So what I'm gonna do is just remove these from the harness since I'm not gonna reuse the harness. There we go. We'll just coil these up for now. These go to the stereo amp. We're gonna do the same thing for P2. There's a lot we need to get rid of and only a few that we need to keep. All right, so I got all those wires coiled up and I labeled this one P2. And here's all the other wires for speakers and whatever else. Now we'll move on to RBEC. I'm gonna take these wires directly out of the terminals and I'm gonna use these terminal tools, which you can find on Amazon for super cheap. These kind of connectors are bolted together. So all you gotta do is just take this bolt out of here. It's a 7mm. That's all the way loose. There's these little tabs on the side as well. So to get those out, you gotta stick a tiny little flat screwdriver down the sides, and you can kind of either push against the tab or pry against the housing and kind of work it out. You may have to do a little bit on each side, but once you get those free, it'll pop right out. Now to get these pins out of here, they're held in with these blue clips right here. So we gotta get those blue clips out. Just kind of work them up a little bit at a time. They're not locked in there, they're just kind of pressed in there. So go easy, because you don't want to break these if you plan on reusing this like I am. On the front part of this, there's a little tiny little tab right up at the top of it that we need to lift that tab so we can pull the wire out of there. So for that, we're gonna use our little sharp needle guy here. Just kind of stick it on the top of that, underneath that tab. Get that tab out of the way, and then you can pull them straight out, just like that. There you go. So we'll depin the rest of these. So now we'll make sure we get this in the right spot, and we'll bolt it back together. So this has one tab on this side, and then two tabs top and bottom on this side that go in these slots. There's one there, and then top and bottom here, so it's impossible to get these backwards. One thing to note, when you're pulling these wires through there, be careful now that you've got this metal pin on the end of it that it doesn't slice another wire, because there's nothing worse than having an open shield on the wire and then that wire grounding itself and causing a short. So as you're pulling these through, maybe wrap them with electrical tape, or just be kind of careful that you're not dragging them along another wire. Now, a lot of these ports have two wires that go into them, and sometimes you'll find that you'll need to keep one and get rid of another, just like this spot right here where you see we've got a BCM battery feed, which I want to keep, and then this weird dash box thingy, which we now figured out was the keyless remote entry receiver thing. But this is a hot battery wire, so once you hook this up to a battery, this wire is going to be hot, and if it touches somewhere, it'll ground somewhere and it'll fry the whole system. So I'm going to depin this, and once you get it out of there, I'm going to snip it as close as I can so I don't have any part of this hot wire coming out the back. And there we go. All right, I definitely got it cleaned up a lot more than it was. I know it still kind of looks like a little bit of a cluster. There's probably a few more wires that I may need to get rid of, but for right now, I'm gonna call this good enough. This is the RBEC right here. You can see there's not a whole lot of wires going into that anymore. This audio control module has the antenna wires, and a lot of the stuff for the OnStar system was in that, so I was able to depin those. For the climate switch here, instead of depinning them, I actually just kind of snipped some of them off. Pretty sure I'm just gonna need probably a power source and then the AC request out of this, but I'm gonna leave it for now. And you got your BCM here. I'm not sure if we're gonna have to reprogram this or not. That's something that I'm gonna cross that bridge when I get to it. So I just kind of left all the wires attached to all the different ports on the BCM and just wrapped them up right here. And then here is the LBEC. Got rid of a lot of stuff in here because that was a lot of power windows, power locks, and I don't need any of that. This is the Splice Pack 205. I did remove a couple of these wires. One was for the four-wheel drive system and one was for the ABS system, which I don't need any of that. Now this wire here, it goes to the BCM. This is a door latch wire. So I'm gonna wire this into the buttons that turn the lights on when you open the door. Basically tells you when the door is shut and when the door is open. That way the BCM actually knows when the door is open and it can do all its BCM-y stuff. Here is the MBEC. I actually didn't get rid of a whole lot of wires on here because this is kind of one of your main junction box for a lot of these systems. A couple of them I kept and I'm gonna repurpose. This was a panel light for the four-wheel drive switch. So an extra panel light if I need to make lights come on something. And then this is a ground. This went to your keyless remote entry receiver thing. Always good to have extra grounds. And then the underhood bus electrical center. Got rid of a lot of wires on this one. Mostly four-wheel drive and ABS brakes. And you can see now this is the wire loom that's going to go to the rear of the car for rear lights and trailer wiring and fuel pump, that sort of stuff. Got rid of a ton of wires out of the rear. Wait, that sounded wrong. And here's the new wiring for the front of the vehicle. This is the passenger side. You've got headlights, turn signals, and then there's actually an AC circulation thing there. I got rid of all the air temp sensors and the air bag sensors. Now I'm probably gonna end up rerouting a lot of these wires because I want all the fuse boxes and the PCM and the BCM and everything to be inside up under the dash out of the way, because I need to save room in my engine compartment for important things like turbos. But that's gonna change a lot of where the wires are gonna go, and I may need to extend some of the wires. So I'm gonna keep a lot of this wiring just in case I need it in the future. And I think I have a plan on how I can mount those up under the dash, keeping in mind I need to leave room for like a heating system and maybe the wiper motor. But before I can put the wiring in the car, I need to go through all the wiring for the PCM and all the engine compartment wiring. But that's gonna have to wait for another day, so that's gonna do it for this episode. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped you out. If it did, give it a thumbs up. If it didn't, give it 2 thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, check out the socials, buy yourself a t-shirt over here, and I'll see you on the next one.